I want to talk about the autism of it all. Okay, this is one of my favorite topics. And I came across this TikTok yesterday that I felt so seen by. And then I ended up DMing the thought spot, Irene, because she and I talk a lot. And we voice message back and forth. And I said, oh my gosh, I saw this TikTok and here are my thoughts. And she and I had a conversation. And then I asked her permission to share with you some of that conversation. So I actually do have some Irene voice notes to share with you today. I did get her consent. And it's just such a beautiful conversation about being autistic and being seen. So let's get into it. Okay, here's the TikTok that inspired the conversation. It says, no one, autistic people explaining their emotions.
Yeah, so then I felt like that one night in 2008 when I feel like I'm in one of those Ubers where they're just so chatty and do not shut the fuck up. No, I literally feel like I just got done watching season 8, episode 2 of The Kardashians. No, like I feel that feeling like, you know, when you're with kids and they're like trying to get you to watch something, but you're also outside. Like that feeling. And they're like, no, I feel like when you're at the grocery store and there's 2 carts in front of you blocking you, but you don't want to say anything.
Okay, do you? Okay. So I messaged Irene and I said, Irene, this is why I know I piss people off on YouTube. Not my audience, Avi, but like general audiences. I know this is why they hate me, because I had a realization listening to this TikTok that one, people feel like I think I'm smarter than them. I'm going off what people tell me about me. Brittany thinks she's better than people. Brittany thinks she's the top of the hierarchy. Brittany thinks like she knows it all. Brittany thinks like, oh, what is Brittany saying? Brittany's crazy. What is she even saying? And I realized listening to this TikTok that people might feel like I'm leaving them out of the conversation. Like when I tell you guys stories, I'm like, you guys know when you're walking like through Disneyland and it smells like, you know, the turkey leg? Well, obviously not everyone is exactly going to know what I mean, but like when people in my audience are like, no, I get that. That's that feeling. That's the autism. Now, so I messaged Irene and I said, Irene, I said, this is me. And I said, oh my gosh. And then Irene just came through with the wisdom. So I made this little video for you. I took this picture from Irene's Instagram. Isn't it cute? And I made a little video so we have something to look at while she talks. But this is literally me and Irene DMing each other in voice messages. So just, okay, a little behind the scenes. And she did give me permission to show this because again, most of the conversations we have in private are the same ones we would have on stream, right? Okay, here we go.
I talk about this concept all the time on my channel, how a part of why it's so difficult for autistic folks to communicate in like a universal way, which is, I guess, this quote unquote socially acceptable way or the social normative type of way, is because the way that we process is very sensory based, which is very feeling based. Like we're literally like our reactions to things and our thoughts themselves aren't like words. They're like, if you think about it, when we're processing something, our actual thoughts are like memories or sensations.
Okay, pause there. So this is very true for me, which you've probably seen in the way that I storytell. And my partner and I, this is a lot of our communication struggles are like ADHD versus autism. And like, he'll be like, okay, Brittany, what does your pain feel like? I'm like, you know, when you're like in the mountains and you've been in the snow for too long and it's like 3 hours, but it's not sunset yet. And then you're cold, but you're also tingly. And he's like, no. And I was like, okay, listen. He's like, can you explain it in like a literal, like what does it literally feel like? I'm like when like little men inside of my bones, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and they're chipping away. And he's like, does it feel painful? Does it feel sharp or dull? I was like, dull, like the Mickey Mouse hammer on like a Looney Tunes cartoon. And he's like, this is literally my life. And this is why, okay, my partner is like so good at understanding me because he can naturally like translate, right? Like what I'm trying to say to him. And then he'll like tell the doctor or he'll like translate it to other people. But this is the disability of it all, because as a YouTuber, I feel like I have so much to fucking say, but when I'm trying to talk to other audiences, it's like so much work for me to translate it into like their speak. But that's why I think I'm so aware of the bubbles, because I'm like, oh, when you say this word, you mean this. And when I say this, I mean this, right? And I'm so glad you guys are resonating with this because it is so fucking real. It is so real. Okay, wait. Oh, Irene just hits it out of the park. Listen to this.
That we feel in our bodies. And so it takes a lot of work to then intellectualize what we're thinking into like actual tangible words, like linguistics. And not only that, but it takes a lot of like social skill to know what sort of linguistics to use in order to convey that accurately to the person you're talking to. Like, that's a lot of fucking work. And it's two different parts of your brain. Like, the part of your brain that's in charge of language is completely different than the part of your brain that processes sensory information. And so we have to, like, in order to communicate in a neurotypical way, we have to like go back and forth between those two different sides of our brain, which is just 2 times more work than an average person, you know? And so, yeah, we could probably sit there and
Which is probably why I hated debates. Listen, when I watched The Public Offender, I love a call-in show. Girls, I love listening to call-in shows, talk radio shows, talk shows that get call-ins or panels. I love listening to debates because I want to hear everybody share their opinion and move through ideas. But when I'm there myself, I feel like it's so much mental exhaustion. It's so much work for me to start to convey what I'm really saying, especially like since I feel like everything is so layered and I have thousands of books in my brain and I don't have the brain that can just like pull it out and reference the quote. But I know it's in there because I've read all these books. I've watched all these documentaries. See, I'm not bragging. Irene's going to talk about this. I'm not sharing this to brag. Brittany's read 2,000 books. I wondered why that pissed people off when I would say that. And it's because they think they're like, oh, you think you're smarter than me? And I was like, what? No. Every person I know reads thousands of books. Like, that's so, I've been in book clubs my whole life. I did book competitions as a kid. What do you mean? That's like, but then I realize when I talk about it, I'm saying, just so you know, I love to read. And they're like, oh, so you think you're better than me? I'm like, what? And it's because people think because you read thousands of books, you're smarter than them. But every girl who reads smut knows that's not true. Not that reading smut makes you stupid, but you know, like, just because you're reading smut does not mean you know history, right? And so, you know, Irene's going to explain this, but basically there's this issue with when I tell people stories or I'm trying to relate to them, they think I'm trying to say that I'm better than you. And I'm just trying to say like, this is how I feel. Yeah. Oh yeah. Chat said, oh, so you hate waffles? Exactly. It's like, oh, so you hate waffles. And it's like, no, I didn't say that. But that's what it feels to them. And I get it. And then, okay, well, listen, Irene, she'll explain it.
try to think of like the best way to communicate it. But for the most part, like, people like you, for example, it's just easier to explain what you're actually thinking, which is like, this thing is making me think about, oh, that one time, you know how it feels when you're cooking something and then the oil kind of like splashes into your face and it hurts really bad. Like, that's how I feel right now. Like, it's easier to convey the anxiety or like the intensity of that momentary pain that oil splashing on your face feels than to like objectively sit there and talk about how anxious you feel about a certain situation, you know? And
which, by the way, that's why I really resonated with, what's that girl in Love, Abby? You know, Abby, I really resonated with how she tells stories. Her mom would say that. Her mom says, Abby doesn't say I'm angry. She says, I feel the same way I felt when I was on that Disney trip and it didn't go well. I do that. I say, do not piss me off like it's 2004 and I'm back in high school. It's like, what does that mean? It's like, do not piss me off. You know what I mean? Like, do not make me upset. Do not make me feel like I'm 2007 Brittany graduating high school. Okay? Like, that is exactly, yes, Discord. I think Abby from Love on the Spectrum actually talked about this. Exactly. That was the most relatable part of Abby's brain for me, where I was like, yes, Abby. Yes, Abby. And so I have learned over time to be like, I am angry. Like, this is making me pissed off. I feel angry. Like, I had to learn to say, but then also I default to, that's the thing. That's why I always try to say, like, who are you and how should I talk to you? That's why I have to change. That's the part that is so frustrating as an autistic person, is I have to change to talk to you because you won't learn how I talk. So I have to learn how all of you fucking talk, but you don't have to learn how I fucking talk because I'm the one with the deficit, or I'm the one who's disabled, or I'm the one who's autistic. And then I'm sitting here doing all of this fucking emotional labor for all these fucking bubbles. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Which is why I've worked so hard to move my work towards a certain audience, because when I was trying to be more open, when I was trying to like invite everybody in, I was the only one doing all the emotional labor to understand all of you fuckers. And that's why I was so tired. I was like, bro, you're not even trying. Like, you're not even trying to understand what I'm saying. You're just assuming the worst thing out of me when I feel like I'm being so obviously blunt and authentic and real, and you're sitting here accusing me of doing things I'm not even doing, bro. Okay.
Like other neurodivergent people or other autistic folks are going to know what you're talking about. Like they're going to know that you're just trying to explain a feeling. And because our brains processes sensory stuff very richly as well, we know that when you're like getting us into a sensory memory or like experience, we know how to like lose ourselves in that experience and feel whatever it is that you're trying to convey, and know that that feeling is what's important rather than the thing.
Hold on, pause. Chet says like you guys are also struggling, right? You said, why am I crying? This feels so real. People get angry at me all the time. Here's what I want you to do. If you feel like the world is getting angry at you, this is what I did. I said, hey, sounds like we're communicating differently. No big deal. We won't have this conversation. Because that's what's literally happening. Hey, sounds like we're not communicating clearly. We're not going to have it then. And then if they're like, no, I want to talk to you, be like, okay, then you will learn how to communicate in this moment, because right now, like, we are miscommunicating. Now, of course, if you are engaging in a space that is literally not understanding you, then you have to understand the space so well that you mask appropriately, which is the survival part of masking. Because that's just the reality, girls. Okay? That is why masking is so important, because at some point, the world is not going to bother to get to know you and will come at the expense of your safety and your money and all the other things. So then now, yes, it falls on our shoulders to protect ourselves, because fuck the world is certainly not going to do it. Okay? And that's why we learn to do it, because it's important. Okay? It is.
Itself, like the reason why people feel alienated by your way of expressing and explaining a certain feeling or like sensation is because people are, regardless of if they're neurodivergent or not, if they're using social hierarchies as their filter of understanding another person, when you're talking about an experience that they cannot relate to, they think that you're trying to imply like a disconnect between you and them, and you're
exactly. So when I used to tell, like, and I thought because we were all neurodivergent, or at least I thought because we were progressive, or at least I thought because we were debate people, or at least I thought, you know what I'm saying? Like, I thought, oh, we would, understand each other better. So then when I would get on the debate panels and I would say something, and they'd be like, what the fuck are you saying? I'd be like, what? And then I'd be like, well, I've done this. And they're like, oh, Brittany with her fucking, oh, this just happened to me. Wait, this just happened to me. On the podcast channel, I specifically, oh my God, wait, where is this comment? Oh my God, it's on the Discord. On the podcast channel, I was talking about how the show makes no sense as a written character, because the fictional character in the show went to a sex club or a sex store and was like uncomfortable, which makes no sense to me, because like she's supposed to be this fourth wave feminist who's supposed to destigmatize sex. So why is she uncomfortable in a sex shop, right? And then somebody wrote this comment on my podcast. Oh my God, hold on. Let me... This comment's crazy. Hold on. Oh my God, this comment's crazy. So she wrote this on my podcast, and I was like, girl, okay, this is what I'm trying to say. It says she was uncomfortable in the sex shop because she was with a man she barely knows who is religious, not because she's uncomfortable. Sorry, but I'm so sex positive and freakish that I can look down on people for claiming to be sex positive, and making fun of their discomfort in a sex shop is not a good look. Not all of us normies want to listen to a podcast by a woman who thinks a naked protest is just a Tuesday and getting fucked in the ass is like kissing in a playground. Ma'am, girl. And this is what I'm saying. When I make a podcast and I say, girlies, here's the future you could have, here's how good your life can be, and you hear it as me shaming you when I'm talking about a fictional character on a fucking show, lock in, girls. That's what I'm saying. I am sitting here telling you, hey, I figured this thing out. Do you want this tool so your life is better? And they're like, you think you're better than me? And I was like, I mean, I think I'm better than this fictional character that they wrote into a show. Even the fictional character, I said, how is she 40 years old and doesn't know that Jews don't eat pork? And then somebody in the comment section was like, well, not everybody knows that. I was like, it's called Google. And I'm talking about a fictional character. You're telling me, are you so inconsiderate as an adult that when somebody says I'm a part of this very specifically famous religious group, that you're not going to do any fucking research before you meet their family and give them a gift? I'm sorry that you were never loved as a child and then given tools by your parents, but that is not something to brag about or normalize. We cannot be normalizing that our kids are going to people's homes and disrespecting cultural like expectations because they didn't bother to Google a very famous, a very common thing known about Jewish people. Do you also know Mormons or Muslims don't eat pork? Just in case you didn't know that? You know what I mean? Like, are you serious? You never heard of a Jewish person before? It just feels so stupid. And then the woman is supposed to be educated and she doesn't know that? You know what I mean? Did you even see if it was kosher? Did you even ask? Like, it's all of that stuff. Like, there's this thing that happens where like, I'm just trying to give you all tools, but like people don't want the tools because it feels like, this idea of, I don't know, like this like, oh, not all normie, like even the word normie. Guys, when I say normie, first of all, normie people are not finding my podcast. So who the fuck are you? Okay, normie people are not writing that kind of comment in my comment sections. When I think of a normie, I think of somebody not on the internet, who's not in my space, who's certainly not writing that weird of a comment in my comment sections. Like, you might get offended at the word normie, but why are you here? Why are you even in this space? You know what it's just like such a weird idea, I think. Okay, back to Irene. By the way, for those asking, this is the Thought Spot Irene. She and I were DMing because we talk, we're friends. And we were DMing and I asked her if I could share these DMs, these audio, we send audio voice messages to each other. And I asked her if I could share them on this stream. She said yes. Okay. Because she just had such good input or just so much wisdom to share. And I was like, girl, can I please share this? It's so good. And she's just replying to me. This is just how we have conversations in DMs, literally.
You're establishing yourself higher on the hierarchy. And that's because that's how neurotypical people tend to talk and exchange through like communication. It's not about like the objective experience and like being able to relate to each other through these sorts of sensory or emotional experiences. They take it very literally. Like when someone's talking, how often do you hear someone like throw in these like random facts that don't even really matter, but it's like a way to signal to the other person whether you guys are like relating to each other or whether or not they're above you. Like someone talking about their weekend and they're like, yeah, the other day I was talking to my friend from that I went to Stanford University with when we were in medical school together. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like people give all this information that is about social hierarchy rather than the experience itself, which then doesn't help when you have an autistic person like you doing the same thing, like you're explaining your experience in great detail, but people mistake that as you trying to like make yourself seem like you're better than them because you get to experience something they may not understand, rather than just them seeing it as, oh, you're trying to drop me into your body in what you go through in that moment. And even though I may not have been through that exactly the way you have, I can, with my imagination and creativity, imagine what it's like to have been in your shoes. And then once I feel what you felt, now I know exactly what you're trying to explain to me.
Exactly. So that was the first response. And then she kept responding to me. So we're going to move to the second response. But this is exactly what I'm trying to explain to people. Like when I created the levels as an example, and people were like, why'd you make it a number system? I genuinely made it numbers because I didn't want to remember names. And they're like, no, you made numbers so you could be on the top of the numbers like hierarchy. And I was like, no. And I understand why you would think that because a lot of these like guru men, a lot of these men would do that. If I was a course selling grifter NFT man, yes, I would have made a level system and I would have put myself at the top. But I'm just actually neurodivergent and I cannot remember things. And it would just be easier if I remembered 1 through 5. Literally exactly the reasoning. But nobody will believe that who doesn't have this kind of brain because they would never do it like that. That's why I say, see, if I did this, it would be malicious. If they did this, it would be malicious. If I did this, it would not be malicious. We can do the same action and have a completely different why of why we're doing it. But that's why people really hate the levels because they think I'm trying to put myself at the top of a hierarchy when I was just trying to like keep it easy to remember.
But if you think about it, that's a social deficit, right? Like it's a social deficit to not be able to perceive hierarchies in that way. Like it's quote unquote my social deficit to hear someone like you talk and not think, oh, she's trying to establish hierarchy. She's trying to like make me feel bad or she's better than me. Instead, I take it very quote unquote literally. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me try to feel what she's feeling. And by the end of your story, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I know exactly what you're trying to say. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is what's so interesting about autistic brains versus non-autistic brains and who you associate with. Like the way that we, like us talking together can go so much further than you trying to talk to someone else that's constantly going to misunderstand your way of expressing as like you're trying to establish social dominance over them.
Exactly. Right. So that's what it is. So the reason I think, sometimes you meet people in your life and you just talk so, this is another thing. When I say, okay, I'm going to say something, but this is another thing I worry about. Irene and I have been able and successful in forming a friendship through work and outside of work. It's, limited because we're not in the same place, but we do take time out of our day to have personal phone calls with each other on occasion. Okay. Sometimes every few months, usually every few months, we sit down, have a convo, check in. We're also very comfortable with one another and we just really connect. And one of the things that we think is funny is like, why do we connect so well? Why is it so easy and like, I can't like just so minimally exhausting talking to Irene? But I say that I never want people in my life to hear this and compare it to them and say like, well, why don't we have that relationship? Because I've had people say that like, well, I don't get why you can talk to them, but you can't talk to me. I don't know either. I think logically, it's just that this takes less spoons and it's more available and it's more exciting to some extent. But that's not a dig at you. It's just to say like, you should just accept things the way they are instead of worrying about it. Why do some people become closer and some people don't? I don't know. Like, I mean, I think I know, but I don't think it's like, I can feel so intimately closer to my own mother and still talk to Irene more. Like, I love my mother more than I love Irene, but I want to talk to Irene more than I talk to my mother. Because when I talk to Irene, I feel seen and heard and we can talk and she feels seen and heard. When I talk to my mother, it turns into a fight. But yet I deeply love my mother and Irene loves her mother more than we love each other. And so sometimes like, your mom will be like, well, why can't you talk to me like that? Well, so again, like I feel like there's something there. I feel like there's something about it, right? Chet said it's normal for autistic people to get along better with other autistic people. Well, I would preface this by saying, I don't think it's neurotypical or autistic. I think it's specific to the consciousness because there are a lot of autistic people I have that I get exhausted by faster than Irene. And neurotypical people that I like just as much as I like Irene. So for Brittany, I think it's a little reductive to think it's just autism, but sure, I agree generally. It could be easier, but also it can be harder. Because you ever seen autistic on autistic crime happen in this chat 1,000 times? We also miscommunicate. I think it's the consciousness. I think it's a lot of seeing one another, but I think that even as a content creator and as a creative, I take it into account, right? Because here I am, I'm working so hard. I'm trying my best. But at the end of the day, like I am not digestible. And I'm not saying that because I need pity. I'm saying that because I'm like, interesting. Why am I not digestible? What is it about my content that makes it hard for people to like grab onto? And I've gotten feedback from people. I can't understand your language. The vocabulary is too large. It feels like a bunch of inside jokes I don't get. But if you are new to my channel and you feel this way, one of the other feedbacks I've gotten is if I watch Brittany for a couple months, I start to pick up the language and I get it. Once you get it, it's so much fun. But then if you're a hater who's a boy on the internet and you hear that, you're like, yeah, if you stay around her cult for 2 months, you learn the language and then you're in the know. See, Brittany has all this secret language, spoons, ooh, levels, ooh, introspection, ooh. And then they're like, see, you have to stay around and learn her language. And then all of a sudden you're in the know. And I'm like, you guys are, oh my God, relax. Like it's because they don't bubble hop enough. Have you guys never jumped into a bubble you've never heard of and tried to learn the language? You ever watch a sports channel? It's like a different language. I turn on the sports channel and I'm like, what's happening? What's a layup? Who? Touchdown what? Like, that's a totally different bubble, different language, different inside jokes. They're out here referencing Curry this and Jordan this, and you're just like, who? What? Whose wife what? What's a what? What? And it's like, okay, yeah, it's a different bubble with different words, different, but they don't think about it. They don't think about it because they're just, you know what I'm saying? Ugh. Anyways. I just wanted to share that with you because I found it so deeply comforting and so good for me as a creative to recognize, like, okay, if I want to get bigger as a channel, I either have to translate things a little bit better and or use context to explain it to people and or just really focus in on my audience, which I think is really the point, right? Zora, welcome to memberships. It's like, I don't want you to lose yourself in the world, but I also want you to find yourself too. Okay? Discord said Brittany being very gay about her sport knowledge. Hold up. Okay. Slam dunk. All rim. No net. That's so good. I'm so good. Touch. No. 360 touch. No. I got it. I lost it. Damn it. That's all I got. Okay? That's all I got. So all of this to say, don't freak out because you feel like people aren't understanding you. Accept that all language is different, even if you're speaking the same language, and understand that it's okay. It's okay. And also, I think it's really ironic that I act like gay people don't watch sports as if the whole WNBA is a lesbian. You know what I mean?